can set it up. And hello, this is Noreen from Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And it's Tuesday evening and it is as hot as hell outside. But you know what? I'm not going to complain because a few months ago, I was wearing a big, thick, woolly coat with a sweater underneath, and like my head was cold, and I was like, oh my God, when's the sun going to come out? So now the sun is out and I'm sweating like a donkey. I know they don't sweat, but I'm sweating like a donkey. And I'm just going to suck it up and enjoy it, right? Because in a few months, well, who knows, in a week or two, it could be cold. Anyway, tonight is Tuesday night, and I'm really, really excited to be here. It is Tuesday night, and it's my favorite night of the week. Why? Because I get to play with you. So, little bit about my week. What could I share? What secrets could I share about my week this week? Oh, I can tell you about my my juice fasting and all the information that I've been reading. So as you know, probably I'm a diabetic. For those of you who don't know, I am a diabetic, and I got diagnosed with diabetes approximately 3 years ago. So when you get diagnosed with diabetes, it's kind of like, oh my God, am I going to lose my fingers and toes? And my leg's going to fall off. I'm, all kinds of stuff. Am I going to go blind? Because these are the things that we know that can happen. And then the day I got diagnosed with diabetes, my doctor was more disappointed than I was, and I was calming her down. Anyway, she said to me, we can put you on metformin. And I was like, no, we will not be taking any drugs. We will work it out, right? So I go on this rigorous, no starch, no sugar, no wine, no nothing. Just like plain meat and vegetables diet. And I dropped 45 pounds. And I go from having a butt that was like dum to a butt that's like tingling, 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 really small, right? And I was just like, oh God, I don't like this. And plus I felt cold. And so my blood sugar went down really low. And it was really great. My doctors were really happy. And, I got sort of lackadaisical because it is really a lifestyle change. And it's really difficult to keep that up, right? I mean, I can read all the stuff about it. If you're a man, your penis will not be able to get erected. And if you're a woman, you'll get numb in the vagina and all these various different illnesses, which doctors don't tell you. So, but anyway, I couldn't keep it up, but I've been managing it. So it's been sort of up and down and up and down. So I went to the doctor's 2 weeks ago, and she says to me, Noreen, you got to keep it at a manageable rate. And I looked at my chart and I said, if I can keep it at this rate, and I haven't done very much to keep it this way, what if I really just took it on? So I met this guy who he's been a diabetic for 6 years, and he's never taken a metformin in his life. And his blood glucose level is really low. It's 6 and under. And what he was doing vegetables, eating a lot of vegetables. Well, I had just declared a couple of days before speaking to him, that I had to eat more greens and eat more vegetables. And so in speaking to him, and he told me that he was juicing, I thought, oh, could I try this on? So I didn't have a juicer. I said between now and Friday, I think it was Tuesday, I'll get myself a juicer. I go home 2 hours later, the neighbor knocks on my door and says, Nor, we're moving. Come to our apartment and see if there's anything you want. So I go to their apartment and I says, nah, not really. Oh, yes, there is. I'll take that juicer and that juicer. So I got my juicer. So I've been juicing. And yesterday was the first time that I was able to get my blood sugar down to a really good rate. So the night before I ate chocolate, right? So I had a chocolate bar before I went to bed, and I didn't brush my teeth. Right? So I went to bed with chocolate teeth, yum, right? And woke up in the morning and my blood sugar was 244, which is not good. So add my juices and stuff and did my day. Then it went down to 174. Then it went down to 140 something. And then late that night, after I ate and I wasn't going to eat anymore for the rest of the night, it went to 129. That is amazing. Right? This morning, I woke up at 167 because I didn't eat. That's great because it's going down. So I've been reading all this information about diabetes. We can get our blood sugars down. We can heal ourselves, but it's all about food, diet, and nutrition. So I have been working out and I have been eating it, and I'm really, really excited because I'm committed to not take metformin and really manage all the ailments that my poor little body has. As fabulous as it looks, it has ailments. So anyway, that's less about me, and let's talk about tonight's show. Yay! Tonight's show is I have Pablo Velez, who is Cipriano and Velez.
Velez Cipriano.
So I did it back to front. See, it wouldn't be me if I did it the right way. Cipriano and Velez. He is an immigration attorney. Velez and Cipriano. Did it again, see, unconsciously. He is an immigration attorney. And when I created this show, actually, I wanted to have Pablo to be one of my first guests, and he wasn't. But you know what? It's always better late than never, and save the most fabulous for now. So welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your diabetes progress. I didn't know that you were working on that. So
yeah, I am.
Congrats.
I've been working on it. It's like it's life. It's a part of life right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So welcome. So Pablo, I've been wanting to have you on the show for a really long time, and I just didn't, but now I do. So, but you have a lot to talk about now. You married. You have a new baby.
That's right.
How many months now?
7 months. A little bit over
Christ.
7 months. Yeah.
7 months. So fast. Time is really flying.
Mm-hmm.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. I want to know, how did you get into law? What made you choose the law? And furthermore, what made you choose immigrations?
Well, I got into immigration law. My family, they're all immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I'm first generation, born in Miami, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
My family came over from Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I've always seen it as a way of paying it forward to what this country has done and being able to help people in that situation acclimate here, be employed, and, you know, exercise their full rights as Americans if they choose to be that.
Right. And so, but how did you get into law? What made you choose law?
I mean, you know, it just started off as a childhood dream.
Really?
When I was 10 years old, I'd watch shows like Divorce Court and the Judge. Not necessarily that I wanted to go into family law, but
Right.
I like the action of litigation or whatever it looked like on TV, the
Mm-hmm.
Law and Orders, and that all looked, you know, somewhat glamorous. And being that I liked history, I liked English, I thought it would be maybe a good fit for me professionally.
Uh-huh.
Originally, I didn't think I would practice law. Really what I wanted to do was go into diplomacy and be a foreign service officer.
Mm-hmm.
My first trip overseas to Cuba when I was 14 years old in 1998,
Mm-hmm.
I really was just affected by the situation, everything I saw there, and I really wanted to see how I could make a difference.
Right.
Ultimately, when I went to college and I decided to study international affairs, it was just really something I was passionate about,
Mm-hmm.
and I figured that the law would be a good supplement to make me a better officer. But then I sort of fell in love with the immigration practice, and
Right.
that's what I've been doing ever since.
And you're really good at it. I must say, he's very good at it.
Oh, well, thank you.
So you decided to do law when you were 10. It's something that attracted you at 10,
Mhm.
right? 10 years
Exactly.
old. You're almost like Ron Paltrow.
Not quite. Not quite. He's better looking than me.
You have to have a few more decades
Yeah.
on top. But he started his law practice. Well, wanted to be a lawyer at 12. So is this something you absolutely knew this was something that you wanted to do?
I knew that it was going to be somewhat in that direction.
Uh-huh.
Advocacy for people, defending people,
Mhm.
helping them get from point A to point B. That's just always been a passion of mine, is
Mhm.
helping people in some capacity. And this was just a good fit.
Awesome. So when you're not doing law, what do you do?
When I'm not doing law, parenting.
Yeah, but I also
Trying
know,
to parent.
right, trying to.
Well, you have to try to. It's not something that you could perfect. You know, you do what you can.
Uh-huh.
You help as much as you can.
Well, that's going to be a lifelong job.
Absolutely.
And I know that you are an avid writer.
Yes, absolutely. I do enjoy writing. As of late, I haven't worked on any formal pieces, but I would contribute to Abernathy magazine, actually based out of Harlem, and they create a lot of content for the African American community, just the Pan-African diaspora in general. So I contributed a few pieces to them, and I try to stay active as much as possible.
Cool, because I've read a couple of your pieces, and I actually saw something that you wrote the script to the animation. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I did read that. It was very good. So tell me what, okay. So what I want to know about on this show is, I want to know about immigration. I want to know about the war, you know, the war, the so-called war.
Sure.
I want to know about the so-called people that are coming across the border, true, false, or just some baloney, right? Because in my life, I've only ever met one person. In all the time that I've been in the United States, I've only ever met one person that ventured through that, you know, to cross the border. So I want to know about that. And I want to know your thoughts on all this conversation and hoopla about immigration. I think, to me, I think it's just smoke and mirrors.
Sure, and that's a good place to start, with the smoke and mirrors. What everyone sees that's not involved in the immigration world professionally or is coming over themselves is really what the media portrays. That's why people have such strong opinions about the immigration system and immigration in the U.S. one way or another, depending on their media outlet. You know, it's either this is a huge crisis and people are pouring through the border if you watch certain networks, or it's, you know, look at the human rights abuses and what the current administration's doing if you watch other networks. So all that information is really filtered down and given to you. I think being in New York, we have a really unique perspective in terms of how we experience immigration in the U.S., because this is really the melting pot. Demographically, the most diverse city in the country.
And I'm going to have to hold that thought right there. Let's put a pause on it.
Okay.
And we'll be right back after these break.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network. Are you stuck in a rut? Negative thoughts, feelings, and conversations got you down? Hi, I'm Noreen Sumpter, the Potentiator. Tune in every Tuesday at 9 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time and listen for new ideas on my show, Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way, on talkradio.nyc.
Who do you want to connect with?
Are you an entrepreneur or intrapreneur looking to build your following?
Welcome to our show.
Follow Me Friday with Joan
and Priya.
Tune in every Friday at noon Eastern
on talkradio.nyc.
We're your digital connectors. Woo woo!
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
So we're back. This is Noreen Sumpter from Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And today I'm speaking with Pablo Velez of Velez and Cipriano. I said it correctly. So at the break, we were talking about how we were setting things up. I want to talk about the wall. I want to talk about, you know, is it smoke and mirrors? And you were saying.
Yes, I think I left off at the point where, you know, experiencing immigration here in New York City, we see a diversity of people like the rest of the nation doesn't. So we can touch it a little bit more. We have an idea of it, although we are very far from where they want to put the wall up.
Right.
So we also get that information through the media as well, and don't have a clear picture of what that exactly looks like, because there are a lot of folks who come through that border and end up in New York working in all different kinds of industries, and they're hidden in plain sight. You see them all the time, but you just, they fade into the background. So it's just interesting.
I think in New York, it's kind of like an understand that someone comes from somewhere. It's not like I'm an immigrant. You're an immigrant. You're an immigrant. Are you an immigrant? So are you an immigrant? So it's 4 out of 5 of us in this room are immigrants, right? So it's bigger than we know.
But that's our particular experience here, because if we go to the middle of the country as opposed to on the coast in the large cities, then we're few and far between.
Right.
And then what people know about us or understand about us is completely different than what we would expect. And vice versa. I mean, there's a lot of ignorance on both sides, but
right.
But, since we're talking about immigration specifically, that's, where the problem is. So, with respect to building a border wall, because I think that's sort of the big controversy, and it seems like a lot of people in the country voted to do something like that, or they were okay with the idea.
Yeah.
Just first things first, I think one of the biggest misconceptions about U.S. immigration is that most people who are here illegally or undocumented, better put, come through that border.
Right.
They really don't. The majority of people who come here and become undocumented are people who show up with tourist visas and they never leave. Confession.
I was one of those people who actually came. Well, I didn't need a visa actually because I'm British, right? I think they have
the visa waiver program.
Now, right?
Yes, exactly.
I think they have to have a visa now. Though.
Well, no, they don't now. So it was probably the visa waiver program. But when you're British,
I didn't know nothing about
over.
No visa waiver.
You can come over for 90 days at a time,
exactly.
and vice versa for U.S. nationals. It's an understanding that we have.
Right.
But for folks who come from countries that we don't have that kind of agreement with, like India, for instance, China, they do come on tourist visas, and folks, overstay. Just to give you 2 examples.
Well, technically, I knew I wasn't going back, so it wasn't like an overstay. Let me say that. But I came and I applied. I got married. I came on one of those marriage visas. I got one of those marriage things, and I was married. And 10 weeks later, literally 10 weeks later, back then, 1985. I got my green card. It
was a lot faster back then. Now it takes
fast.
about a year and 2 months or so just to get in front of an officer for your interview for a green card, because so many people are applying.
Right.
And applications surged, as you can imagine, right after the election. Everyone who had a visitor's visa or a working visa wanted a green card. Everyone who had a green card wants to become a citizen. Becoming a citizen used to take 90 days. Now it takes over a year, depending on where you live, because again, there's a huge surge.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what's this? So, tell me, approximately, do you know how many people come through the border, or the so-called, through the desert of Mexico?
There's a lot. It's difficult to pinpoint exactly, and there's a lot of figures out there. Now, one figure that kind of stays consistent, not necessarily people who physically cross, because that can't be counted accurately by anyone.
Right.
But folks who are undocumented, either because they did that or because visas expired and they happen to be here.
Right.
Best estimates place that number around 10 to 11 million people.
Okay. Is that a lot though? That's about the size of New York.
It's really not, because exactly, it's the size of New York in comparison to the rest of the country, which is north of 300 billion people. It's really a drop in the bucket. And a lot of these folks are concentrated in certain areas. So, there's places in the country that don't see any of them, or have never met someone who's either undocumented or even someone from a foreign country.
And that's all countries. That's not Mexico, because the way they make it sound is though it's 10 million people coming out of Mexico.
Right, which is completely false, especially because Mexico specifically has seen negative immigration for the past few years. What's really happening is that folks from Central America, particularly El Salvador, Honduras, Guatemala, are crossing through Mexico to get to the U.S. And Mexico is basically allowing them through for the most part, because obviously no one wants to deal with that kind of a crisis.
They don't want them
of people moving through that they're not really accustomed to. dealing with that kind of population flow in their economy can't really withstand it.
Exactly. So basically, we don't want you, but you can come through. If you get through and you go to America, good on you, like that sort of thing.
That's more or less how they're trying it. It's a little bit hands off, but you know, some folks do stay there,
right,
and they end up working there temporarily. But a lot of them are also looking to reunite with family here in the U.S.
Right.
So you have that too.
So I also want to find out, I mean, you know, I saw this thing on TV where Gayle King was going to, not TV, on the internet, where Gayle King was going somewhere in the country to talk about is it 2,000 children that are missing?
Oh, I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with.
There's like 2,000 children have been separated from their family, immigrant children that have been separated from their family.
Oh, in the area, I'm saying you're referring to the recent.
Yes.
Activity.
Yes, I don't really know that much about it. All I just know is it's a bunch of kids. A lot of children have been separated from their parents, and they're all immigrants. And then I saw a picture of children in cages.
Sure.
Who were children of little kids of immigrant families, and they had them in cages. Do you know anything about that?
Sure. So very briefly on that, not to get, you know, too nuanced, but basically what's happening is that when folks come through the border, and not through a port of entry, which is where you get inspected and where there's actual officers there that can determine whether you're admissible or not into the U.S. And again, like they've mentioned, this has been the law in the books. This is nothing new. If you can apply for asylum, if you're seeking asylum at the border at a port of entry, and you can be paroled into the U.S. and wait for your hearing if you have a bona fide case or if they deem that.
Right.
I don't know what kind of scrutiny they're using right now to determine this. What's happening a lot, or what the reports are showing, is that basically folks are showing up and smugglers or alleged smugglers or whatever it is are carrying children who may or may not be theirs. So there's this separation that occurs while they're trying to figure out if there's indeed a bona fide relationship or not. Sometimes if, for instance, they're able to spot a criminal record of someone who's coming across through Interpol or other methods, those are people that can be separated as well, because they do, you know, create a public policy problem, as well as, for instance, MS-13 members who have been removed from this country or who were attempting to enter, and it's well known that they are.
MS-13 is the gang people.
Correct.
I met one of those.
And that's not exactly, you know, the majority of folks by any means. These are people mostly. It's a small group, but you know, this is just, they all get in the mix. Right. They all get in the mix, and you know what the border officers are facing, you know, is a lot more difficult than what's painted in the media, obviously. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt, in my opinion, to have sort of a humane policy, and just coming from my perspective, treating these folks as though we're going to prove them guilty, so we assume the best when they're coming in. It's sort of the opposite right now.
Okay, so I just got a little note. It says undocumented parents are afraid to claim their children. So if
that's correct.
Yeah, that's awful.
That's correct, because undocumented people here in the U.S. Will put themselves on the government's radar at the very least and get themselves detained. Right. At worst, if they do try to claim children or other family members. Another thing that can happen as well is that if someone has family who's undocumented here and they're coming in on a valid visa, but there's a questionnaire that the Department of State has you fill out when you're applying for these visas, asking, for instance, if you have any relatives in the U.S., and if you say no and you do, you committed fraud, misrepresentation, and you become inadmissible. Now, a lot of times that goes under the radar, but every once in a while, an officer at Customs can pick something like that up, take you into what they call secondary inspection, and do a deeper search. Now, remember, we as U.S. citizens or nationals have Fourth Amendment rights from search and seizure. That doesn't exist on the border. There's been stories where officers can take a cell phone, force you to unlock it, go through your texts. If the texts are in a different language, they'll bring in an officer that can read that language, and they'll go through and see if you're indeed telling the truth about your intentions. If you have family, you can either comply with them or go back where you came from. So it puts you in that. Like, that's nothing new.
No, because intention was not to get married. I just wanted to come and shack up. Really needed an
Give it a
out.
shot.
Yeah, I needed an out, right? And so I came through, I think it was New Jersey, Newark, and I came on Virgin, and they pulled me to the side, I guess because I looked really young. I was like 20, and I guess I looked really like a teenager. And so they pulled me in and went through my bags and read all my, I had, like an idiot, I had everything, right? So I had this one big suitcase, and he was like, "You're coming to stay, aren't you?" And I was like, "No, I'm not. Why would I do that? I mean, I love England." I just like really sort of gave it all that, right? But my intention was to come and stay for as long as everything worked out, right? But yes, they do have the right to search you, and they can ship you back if you don't fit what they're looking for or what they expect. So we're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back.
You are listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
Are you into comics, movies, and pop culture at large? What about music and TV? Then you're in for a treat. This is Michael Dolce, your host on TalkingAlternative.com. I've been professionally writing comic books, screenplays, and music articles for almost 15 years. Catch my show, Secrets of the Sire, at its new primetime slot, Wednesdays, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and get the inside scoop on the pop culture universe you love to talk about. For more info, go to secretsofthesire.com.
Are you feeling unhappy with your body, shape, or size? Ever feel out of control with food? I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul. Join me to uncover the root to these imbalances and discover a permanent solution to living a healthy life. Join us every Wednesday at my new time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on talkradio.nyc.
Talking Alternative Radio, 24 hours a day.
And we're back. This is Noreen Sumpter from Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And I'm speaking with Pablo Velez from Velez Cipriano. He's an immigration attorney, and we're just having a conversation about the different things that are happening today. And have him just give us a general idea of how, what's going on with the immigration situation. This conversation that seems really huge, and we can't seem to get a handle on it. Right? Like, is there a handle, or is it just like smoke and mirrors to sort of like dodge and weave and to distract us from what's really going on?
Well, I'm just giving my opinion because from what I've seen from my side of the fence, so to say. So the immigration system, I can objectively say, is broken, and that's something that all sides can agree on. The law is just not applied equally. There are longer wait times for folks from certain countries to come over here if they try to legally
What countries
migrate.
are those?
So, for instance, Mexico, the Philippines, India, China. These are countries that have, so there's quotas for how many, for instance, green cards, immigrant visas given out every year.
Right.
And if you're from one of these four countries, there's a lot of immigration occurring from these particular places. So there's this conversation that may or may not be true, but in the interest of diversity, what they do is that they create their own separate queues so that folks from other countries that have lesser immigration to the U.S. have an opportunity also to come in and don't have to wait behind, those four countries that take up most of the visas. That's not just for family members. Interestingly enough, for Chinese nationals and Indian nationals, who have master's degrees and are being sponsored by a company.
Mm-hmm.
So these are folks whose companies have gone through the process of trying to recruit a U.S. worker, have failed to find someone who fills that position,
Mm-hmm.
and they're sponsoring this person in. It actually takes them 10 years to get their green card. So what you end up having to do in the meantime, which, you know, is just a temporary fix, is keep them on some kind of non-immigrant work visa, with work authorization, for your H-1Bs, for example, which is, you know, a buzzword that you hear in the media a lot. So
Right.
that's a temporary work visa.
So let me just try to pick up what you put down. So if, you know, I'm a company and I need a particular type of skill, right? I can't find it in America, but I can go to any one of those countries, China, India, what was that, Mexico,
The Philippines.
and the Philippines, and I can find a person from those countries, right? So, and it takes 10 years for them to get a green card.
So this is where it gets complicated. What I said to you was just, in this case, India and China.
Mm-hmm.
For the other countries, it actually isn't that long. It probably takes about a year.
Oh,
But this is just to give you an example of how the law is not applied
Skewed.
evenly.
right. So
Right.
basically, if a person came in from England,
Mhm.
how long, roughly? Just
About a year.
so
about
it would
a year,
take a
the
year,
whole
a British
process.
person a year.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm laughing because I'm British, right? So it's like, yeah, good on you. But that's not really good, right? Because everybody's like waiting. The other people are waiting. So Europe is because I'm going to say maybe because it's like a white country, right?
It could or could not be. You know, there aren't any quotas on Europe. But
Right.
I mean, the other side obviously is going to argue, yeah, but there's not so many Europeans flocking to the U.S.
Right. Where are they going?
right now.
Yeah.
Europeans.
Yeah. Are they staying home?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, for the most part, they're staying home, but
Oh.
folks are going there
Right.
from their former colonies, and now with the Syrian refugee crisis, a lot of folks are showing up there.
Are going to Europe.
Mhm.
Oh,
But
okay.
you know this is a British national. Like, the colonies have been coming home for quite a while.
That's right.
And France knows that as well.
Right.
But to sort of make an argument in favor of the U.S., the U.S. really assimilates to a better degree immigrants than does Europe, where a lot of folks are living marginalized in
Yes.
society, and it's only till recently that some of these countries are able to assimilate a little bit better.
Mhm.
But you're starting to see countries that haven't received much immigration historically in Europe
Right.
are really moving to right-wing political parties and really wanting to exclude a lot of folks if they
Yes,
can,
absolutely.
which is kind of interesting.
Plus, it's also smaller. So it's a smaller country, so it's
There's
more
less
close knit,
space.
and their dramas are very much on their front doorsteps.
That's
I mean,
right.
ours is too, but we still have a lot of space. In New York, we have our own ideas, our own temperament. There are certain things that we will not stand for as a state, right?
We're used to it, and another thing I would argue is that the U.S. culturally is a capitalist society.
Absolutely.
Like, money is first.
Money is
and
king.
then everything else kind of comes after. So if you put money first, you're probably going to be accepted. If you're going to work hard, you're going to be accepted. And
Right.
that's something that kind of binds everyone together. It's not, not to get overly political, but, people disagree about kneeling in the national anthem in
Right.
football games or, police brutality. Like, people take different sides. But if you're here, you work, you're productive,
Right.
people, they tend to treat you better than not. They value that. In Europe, it's more about tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So
you don't fit in.
there's a lot,
You don't look like us.
if you're new,
Yeah.
probably not.
It's a struggle. So you touched on something, money. So somebody that's got money, they're in. Pretty much, they can buy their way in.
There
sort
is
of.
a way to buy your way into the U.S. if you have quite a bit of money. There's a green card called the EB-5, which is the investor immigrant visa. And basically the way that works is that if you invest $500,000 into a U.S. business, or you create your own business in the U.S. and you hire 10 full-time workers over the course of 2 years, then you can secure yourself permanent residency here in the U.S. You get it's almost like a marriage green card, where you have to first go through those steps, and then 2 years later you have to remove conditions, so basically showing that you maintain 10 employees full time. So there's a benefit, it's a win-win, because someone can basically invest here in the US, and then there's 10 folks who weren't otherwise employed now have full-time employment. So there's arguments about whether that's effective or not, how many jobs have really been created. And it's just you
got to prove it. It's like
exactly.
It's funny because you touched on it's like a marriage, right? So I remember it seemed like back in the day, everybody was asking somebody to marry them, and they were given 10 grand. 10 grand was the optimum number for a green card marriage. Is that still prevalent?
I can't knowingly represent someone who comes in my office and says that they're here to file for a green card, and that's the purpose of getting married. Now, if they just show up to the office and they said, we just got married, we'd like to apply for our green card, that's a different story. I don't really know what the growing street rate is right now for those kinds of things. And just to protect my license as an attorney, I have to be careful about who I represent and that kind of a thing. But no, that's more or less how it works. And obviously these kind of loopholes in the immigration system are what people take advantage of. And then people on the other side that want to make it look like it's a bigger problem than it is, they hang on to these stories and they conflate them a bit, to make their point. So that is a gap. So
you actually supported some friends of mine and got them they were married, 2 gay men, got married. And I think, if my mind serves me right, that where he was coming from, which was Kenya?
Yeah, from Ghana.
Ghana. Being a homosexual is against the law in Ghana. So was that coming in, looking for your rights, or tell me a little bit about that?
No, so the way that family-based petitions work is that the U.S. citizen is exercising their right to reclaim their family member. So in this case, although, a Ghanaian national presents and homosexual at that, presents an interesting asylum claim based on sexual orientation. So if he were physically in the U.S. by some other means, that could have been a claim. But in our case, he just so happened to have a U.S. citizen fiance who was petitioning for him. I don't know if you've seen the show 90 Day Fiance on TLC, but if you haven't, it's really interesting. I had no idea they could dramatize something in the immigration world that wasn't removing people, but they actually did. But just to get back to this, so the U.S. citizen is exerting their right to petition their family member. So it's not about what the foreign national needs to prove. It's that the U.S. national needs to prove that bona fide relationship. And then once that all gets approved, they get processed in, and then it's just a matter of, going through the green card process, what they call adjustment. And then the burden in this case is always on the government to show that someone is inadmissible. Whereas when a foreign national comes in by themselves, or, they're sponsored through another way, then it's their burden to show that they are admissible to the U.S.
It's all very complicated.
It is very complicated. We're not going to be able to cover it in a short period of time. We're not going to be able to cover it in 10 years of conversation.
Because, it goes back to the fact that you said it's broken. The system is broken. And is the system broken because it's now archaic?
Well, I think it's archaic because it's not inclusive enough. I think that we should adopt. So there's been some talk about creating a merit-based system. And some people are against the merit-based system. And you say, well, what about family members? And, my argument is, why not be inclusive? You don't have to do one to the exclusion of the other. You can have both. I think we should have a merit-based system like Canada does, where you can accumulate points and basically show, I have, X amount of education, X amount of, experience in a trade. I bring X amount of investment. I don't have a criminal record. And then all of these things sort of get you points to get you in. Now in the U.S., what we have is basically you can be pulled in by a family member, by an employer. If you have enough money, the $500,000, you can pull yourself in. You can pull yourself in temporarily through what we call an E2 or non-immigrant treaty investor visa, which my firm prepares a lot of, which is when you, not necessarily it has to be a $500,000 million, but it's a substantial investment with respect to what kind of business you have.
Right.
So it depends on your overhead and can you support a sustainable business and create U.S. jobs.
Right.
So you have those three avenues, and you can come as a tourist if you can prove that you have an intent to go back, or if you're from the UK, for instance, or France, or another country that we have reciprocal relationship, you can come for 90 days at a time and not have to worry about that, the Visa Waiver Program, or ESTA. Or you can come as a student. So those are the ways that you can come to the U.S. But it's not one of these things that existed before, 1927, when the Border Patrol really came into force and they really started to check visas. There's a lot of folks who,
But there was a time when you didn't need a visa.
Correct.
Right?
Before that time,
yeah.
you just showed up, and there was plenty of work to be done and that kind of a thing. But that was when we were more of a manufacturing, agricultural society, and we needed people.
Right.
Now with technology, there's less of a need for that. So you see how a lot of folks' work is becoming obsolete. They have to either retrain, or they can't really find themselves, or create a new industry, or do something else. But that's one of the things that complicates matters.
So what does, with the immigrational situation, what do immigrants bring to America? What do they bring? I mean, just overall. I mean, I have an idea of what they bring, but what do they bring?
I mean, taken broadly, I think they bring everything.
Right.
This country would not exist if it weren't for immigration, and that goes back to the founding fathers who weren't born here.
Right.
They obviously, their forefathers showed up. I mean, this was basically vacant land. Vacant land to the extent that it was easily conquered.
Right.
Not like a lot of areas in Latin America where you had big civilizations, the Mayan Empire, the Aztec Empire, and there was a lot of resistance, a lot of fighting that the Spanish faced when they went, and you see how those cultures really blended a little bit more so than here in North America, where you saw a lot more nomadic tribes. So the Europeans, mostly English, French, were able to push them back to wherever they wanted, and it was very easy to do that. They weren't facing huge resistance.
Right. So we're going to hold that thought, and then we'll be right back.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you feeling unhappy with your body, shape, or size? Ever feel out of control with food? I'm Elizabeth Tripp, your host of Nourish the Soul. Join me to uncover the root to these imbalances and discover a permanent solution to living a healthy life. Join us every Wednesday at my new time, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on talkradio.nyc.
TalkingAlternative.com.
I'll ask that question, but when I ask another question. Hi, and we're back. This is Noreen Sumpter from Sumpter. See, it tripped over my tongue. Silly me. So this is Noreen Sumpter from Beyond Potential, Live Life Your Way. And I'm speaking to Pablo Velez of Velez and Cipriano, which is a law firm, and he deals in immigration. So Pablo, are you happy in your choice of career?
I'm very happy. I'm very happy again because I get to help people with what I do.
Right.
Primarily, we help businesses typically opening branches and subsidiaries of whatever they have overseas, opening here in the U.S. We work a lot in the Japanese market. My partner flies back and forth, and he has a lot of ties there, and we've basically leveraged our relationships in order to build a practice that really caters to the Japanese community and helps these businesses open up, primarily here in New York, California, and Hawaii, which are the main Japanese hubs in the U.S. We also help individuals, so families, U.S. citizens, folks who are here who want to bring over, anyone from, and I'll limit this because the law limits this, as opposed to what the media says, their spouses, children, and siblings. And those are the only family that you can sponsor into the U.S. You can't bring over, unfortunately, you can't bring your grandfather, your uncle, your cousin. It just doesn't extend to that. The law recognizes all the way up to sibling.
Right.
And that's it.
But it used to be a time where you could bring anyone.
It could, and before they created these different visa structures, and depending on what time period we're talking about, certain nations were even excluded for coming to the U.S. I mean, in 1882, there was a Chinese Exclusion Act because, decades before that, there were a lot of Chinese migrants who were here and they helped build the railroads. They were basically those workers. And then the U.S. government decided that there were too many, so they created the Exclusion Act. There was a time where the Japanese were excluded from coming here, or when they were here during World War II, were put in internment camps. A lot of people were making an analogy between that and what's happening right now on the border with folks that are coming over for asylum.
Right.
So it's just interesting. Immigration really goes in waves. And depending on when you live in the U.S., you're going to see a different group of people.
I have, because I've seen it when I first came here. I would say right now we have Mexican people. They're the victims, right? They're the pariah of the American government. And when I first came here in 85, around that time, it was the Haitians, right? Haitian people were the pariah, and the government was like picking on them. And so it just seems like every so often, every few decades, there's a race of people that are just victimized by the government or the media, and then they experience, and then it just dies off like it didn't happen. But
it's a very American experience.
It's very complex.
It's very complex, and it's a very American experience. There's that period, and then it passes, and then they're assimilated in one form or another. I think what's making it more difficult now, or after World War II, is that visually the immigrants are different. So before it was like, okay, the U.S. was mainly English, Germanic, so the Anglo-Saxon, white Anglo-Saxons dominated the U.S. population, and then, they looked down on the Irish.
No dogs, no Irish, no black.
Exactly. Then after that, you were looking at Southern and Eastern European migration, so Italians and Poles.
Right.
And then, those folks were discriminated against. But, we're still like kind of on the same color hue. But after World War II, now you're starting to see more folks from Latin America and from Africa. It doesn't matter how clear your English gets or how educated you become, you see one, you see the other, and you can tell the difference in 1 second.
Right.
So that's, I think, caused a little bit more of a slowdown with respect to assimilation. But the interesting thing is that right now, and there's statistics to back this up, there's more interracial marriage than there's ever been in the U.S., which has been legal on the books in all 50 states since 1967. But, really happening, there's just an uptick in that. And
there is a serious uptick in that.
And it's only because that it's inevitable. I mean, that's where this country is going. And, there's a lot of folks who are resistant to that because that's not what they're used to. But it's like swimming against the tide. You can only do it for so long, or you go with it, or you drown. You can only resist for so long.
Yeah, absolutely. It's either, like you said, it's either you risk or you go under.
Exactly.
And I don't think any of us wants to go under. So are there any questions you would like to ask me before we break off?
Sure. So what interests you most about this whole immigration debate?
Okay. So Pablo, what is it that interests you most about all this immigration debate?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you wanted me to ask you.
No, you asked me and then I asked you back.
Oh, if I have any questions that
Yes.
I wanted you to ask me, I don't have anything. You've kept the conversation flowing this entire time so well, so I don't.
All right, so let me answer the question. What interests me about this immigration debate? Well, I'm a person that, like, my vision, and it might sound a little naive, but I watch sci-fi, right? And in the future, there's just one world order. There is no separate countries. We're just one country, one world, right? And the rules, there is a body of people that help us to govern, and everybody's free to be. And we can come and go as we please. That's what I see. And maybe it is the past, but I think that that's my vision for immigration. I think it's overrated. I think it's done its time. And I think based upon the internet that people are allowed to meet whomever they want to meet and marry them, or go meet them and marry them anywhere in the world. I think that it's time for immigration and things like that, separation, it's because it's a form of separation, to be eradicated.
I think, there's a huge debate around that with respect to national sovereignty and keeping countries, and also the fluidity of globalization. So, we live in a globalized, interconnected world, and we can literally be, you get on a plane and you can travel the entire globe in less than 23 hours.
Right.
You really can. I mean, if you wanted to do something like that. There's just no way that we can isolate ourselves unless we really wanted to try to do that. Whereas in the past, in most of human history, it was difficult for most people to basically reach out.
Right.
So now it's becoming a situation where identities are shifting. We're no longer nations. Now we're forming different groups. And what does that look like? So I think that there's just a huge evolution happening with respect to that, and what borders are, and how you defend them, and what that even means. To a degree, it's really all about safety.
Right. I think if we got rid of borders and we did my vision, safety, we would all take care of each other to a degree. Because, look at families, integrated, interrelated, color coding and stuff like that, but we still all have our issues. So it's inevitable. That's just what man is. We have issues.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think that in places that can find mutual interest, and basically what we've been trying to create post-World War II, which is this interdependent comparative advantage where, one side brings this to the table, the other side specializes in this. But there are still a lot of folks who aren't able to bring anything to the table, and then the folks living next to them geographically or what have you want to protect themselves from them, because inevitably they're going to try and see if they can get some of those resources. So it's complicated. I mean, I think that there's instances like in Europe, for instance, where they've been able, with the EU, other than in recent events, which I don't think are really telling of everything, but the EU's been living the way it has. You start also seeing sort of like NAFTA, until now again, but Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. have been relating in a different way that's mutually beneficial for all. So it's interesting. I think that has more momentum than what's happening now. I think this is sort of a reaction to a lot of propaganda, but once people realize that the majority of this is really just that propaganda and it's not making their lives any better and there's no solution for them, then they're going to see that, the way that things were going wasn't as bad.
Okay, I want you to say something about, we've got a few more minutes, but I want you to just tell us about your perfect client.
My perfect client?
Tell us, do your commercial.
Well, a perfect client is one that sends us plenty of work and always has some issues to deal with and has plenty of folks to sponsor. But no, to give you somewhat of a concrete example, an ideal client or a great client for us to work with, and we've worked with several, are companies that are coming over from overseas because, again, they want to open a branch or subsidiary here in the U.S., and they're hiring U.S. workers, but at the same time, they're also bringing over their foreign management.
Right.
So this is a constant flow and need of growth, and they also need visa support, because they're going to have these folks come over on a temporary or full-time basis.
Right.
So they're going to need our legal advice with respect to how to plan that out, how to make sure there's proper transitioning, how to make sure that they're onboarding the right people. So that's who we really look for, and we can really assist.
And give us your website.
Our website is www.velcip, which is VELCIP.com.
And Pablo, we've come to the end of the show, and I just want to say thank you so much. And I just want you guys, the listeners and viewers, to know that Pablo is extremely smart. He is one of the most patient men that I have ever met. He's specific, he's clear, he's detailed, and he does his work like a boss. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. And what can I say? You have a beautiful family, and I wish you all the best that life
thank
has
you
to
for
offer.
having me.
You're more than welcome. So this is Noreen Sumpter signing off from Beyond Potential. Live life your way. Bye.
You're listening to the Talking Alternative Network.
Hello, this is Bruce Chamoff, host of the Web Design and Technology Coach. Join me and my guests every Tuesday from 8